The vastness of space stretched endlessly, with stars twinkling like distant diamonds. Deep within this infinite void, a fleet of alien warships silently made their way toward a small, seemingly insignificant corner of the galaxy. The alien fleet was massive, hundreds of ships, each one more terrifying than the last. These were the Zoroth, a race of warriors who had conquered countless star systems in their quest for dominance. Now, they were headed to Earth, a planet they thought they could easily crush. The Zoroth had heard rumors of humans. They had heard that these creatures were weak, primitive even, and their technology was nothing compared to that of the Zoroth. The humans were a mere annoyance, something to be wiped out with a single strike. The fleet's commander, General Varric, was confident that this would be a simple mission, one that would be over before the humans even realized what was happening. Varric stood at the command center of his flagship, a colossal ship that dwarfed even the largest human vessels. His sharp, angular face, covered in intricate tattoos, reflected the cold efficiency of his people. He stared at the holographic map in front of him, showing the route to Earth. His mind was already thinking of what lay beyond this planet: new worlds to conquer, new species to dominate. The Zoroth had never faced any serious resistance in their conquests. The planets they had destroyed had been weak, their inhabitants easy to subjugate. But something about Earth felt different. The reports had come in strange, cryptic signals coming from the planet, suggesting that humans were more advanced than previously thought. But General Varric didn't believe the rumors. He dismissed them as exaggerations. The humans would be no different from any other race they had conquered. As the fleet moved closer to Earth, the stars seemed to blur around them. The ships traveled faster than the speed of light, their engines powered by advanced technology that allowed them to cross vast distances in mere moments. The lead ship, a dark, jagged vessel known as the Vakar, cut through the void like a blade. Its hull was covered in sharp edges, designed to strike fear into any enemies who saw it. Varric's second-in-command, Commander Zeller, approached him with a report. "General, we are within range of the human system. Our sensors are picking up multiple signals. Some are from their warships, but there are also strange, unknown readings." Varric's brow furrowed slightly, but he remained calm. "Unknown readings? What kind of readings?" "We're not sure, sir. The signals seem to be coming from deep space, just beyond the Earth's orbit. They're unlike anything we've encountered before. Our sensors can't seem to get a clear reading." Varric was irritated by the uncertainty. "Keep scanning. This is just a primitive species. They can't have anything we don't already know how to destroy." But there was something in Zeller's voice that made Varric pause. She was never one to show fear or doubt, yet now there was hesitation in her tone. He turned his attention to the view of Earth that appeared on the large holographic screen in front of him. The blue planet looked peaceful, unaware of the storm that was about to descend upon it. The rest of the fleet followed closely behind, their ships perfectly synchronized as they approached the outer rim of the solar system. As they entered the system, the alien fleet's sensors began to pick up more anomalies. The signals grew stronger, and the unknown readings became more distinct. A deep hum filled the command center, as though the fleet itself was vibrating with the intensity of the mystery unfolding. "We should be able to scan the entire system in a few moments," Zeller said, her voice now more urgent. Varric was still unconcerned. He could hear the growing unease in Zeller's voice, but he dismissed it. His gaze remained fixed on the glowing sphere of Earth. He could already see the primitive human cities dotting the planet's surface. These humans, whoever they were no match for the power of the Zoroth fleet. But just as Varric prepared to issue the order to begin their attack, a new signal flashed across the sensors. It was unlike any of the previous ones. It was sharp, almost like a warning. The color of the display shifted, turning from a calm blue to a deep, almost dangerous red. "General, this is different," Zeller said, now sounding truly concerned. "What is it?" Varric asked, his voice suddenly cold, his focus sharpening. "We're detecting an energy source immense, far beyond anything we've ever seen. It's coming from the planet's surface." Zeller's voice trembled slightly as she spoke. Varric's heart skipped a beat. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. He leaned forward, studying the data more closely. The readings were still unclear, but one thing was undeniable: there was something powerful on Earth, something far more advanced than they had anticipated. What kind of weapon could they have? Varric muttered under his breath, his fingers tapping the edge of the control panel. The alien fleet was now just moments away from the planet, and the quiet command center, the tension grew. What had once seemed like a simple mission was quickly turning into something much more complicated and dangerous. General Varric narrowed his eyes as he stared at the Earth in the distance. The alien fleet had entered the human system without resistance, but now, with the strange signal and the mysterious energy source, everything had changed. For the first time, the Zorith fleet was faced with something unknown. They were not prepared for what lay ahead. As the fleet advanced, the question echoed in Varric's mind: what if the humans were not as weak as they had been led to believe? And what if this mysterious energy source was more than just a weapon? What if it was the key to something far greater than the Zorith could ever imagine? The fleet continued its approach, and the stage was set for an encounter that would forever change the fate of both humanity and the Zorith. The vastness of space was eerily silent as the fleet of Zorith warships approached Earth. The black void stretched endlessly around them, a haunting emptiness broken only by the occasional flicker of distant stars. General Varric stood at the helm of the Varkar, the largest and most imposing ship in the fleet. His mind raced, the earlier unease still gnawing at him. Something felt off about this mission, something he couldn't put his finger on. The rest of the fleet moved in formation, their ships gliding silently through the stars, their advanced engines humming softly. Each ship was a deadly weapon in its own right, designed for one purpose. Yet, as they entered the outer reaches of the Earth system, that same nagging feeling grew stronger. Varric could sense it among his officers too. Their earlier confidence had started to waver. There was no sign of resistance, no sign of anything, except a vast, quiet planet below them. But the silence was oppressive. It spoke of something waiting, hidden just out of view. The holographic displays around him flickered as more data poured in. The sensors continued to scan, but the readings were conflicting, almost as if they were being obstructed. For a brief moment Varric wondered if the humans had somehow found a way to hide their defenses, but he quickly dismissed the thought. These humans were nothing compared to the Zorith. He would not be intimidated by the unknown. General, we've detected a massive energy surge coming from the surface of the planet. Zella's voice broke through his thoughts, her tone more serious than before. She had been at his side for many years, and he trusted her instincts. But her words sent a chill down his spine. The energy surge wasn't normal, not by any standard. It was almost as if something was preparing for battle. Varric turned to her, narrowing his eyes. A surge? What kind of surge? He tried to mask the concern creeping into his voice. Zella hesitated for a moment. It's unlike anything we've encountered. The energy readings are ... irregular. We've never seen a power source like this before. It's almost as if the planet itself is alive, reacting to our presence. Varric stood motionless, staring at the holographic projection of Earth. The data was being relayed in real time now, but it was too fragmented, too scattered to make sense of. Every time they tried to hone in on the source of the energy, shifted, as if it were evading their attempts to get a clear scan. It was as if the humans were hiding something beneath the surface, something ancient and powerful. Should we pull back? Zella asked cautiously, her voice tinged with a rare sense of doubt. The question hung in the air, and for the first time since this mission had begun, Varric found himself questioning his own orders. Could the humans truly have something this powerful? It seemed impossible. How could a primitive species possess such an advanced technology? But deep down, he knew he couldn't retreat now. To turn back would be to show weakness, and the Zorath had never shown weakness. No, Varric said, his voice cold and firm. We move forward. We need to understand what's going on here. This planet will be ours, as it always was meant to be. The fleet continued to press forward, its ships cutting through the darkness. As they neared the outer reaches of the Earth's atmosphere, the energy readings became even more erratic. They were no longer isolated to one location. They seemed to be coming from multiple points across the planet's surface. It was as if the entire planet was preparing for something, as if it had been waiting for this moment for millennia. Just as Varric was about to issue the order to initiate a planetary scan, something happened that made him freeze in place. A sudden and unmistakable signal flashed across the fleet's communications channel, cutting through the static. It was brief, but clear, a message from the humans, prepared to defend Earth. The message was simple, direct, and it sent a shiver down the spine of every officer on the bridge. How could they know? How could they possibly be prepared for what the Zorith had in store? The fleet had never encountered a race that had even the slightest chance of standing against them, let alone sending a message like that. For a moment, the reality of the situation hit Varric hard. There was something more to this planet than he had anticipated. The holographic displays around him flickered as the fleet's sensors tried to lock onto the signal's origin, but the attempt was futile. The signal had been transmitted from multiple locations at once, as though it were coming from every corner of the Earth simultaneously. It was a method of communication so advanced, it left Varric with more questions than answers. What is this? Varric muttered under his breath, almost to himself. He had to admit this wasn't just some backwater planet. The humans had something that gave them the audacity to issue a warning to the mightiest fleet in the galaxy. Zella's voice pulled him from his thoughts. General, we've detected something moving. It's coming from the far side of the planet. It's huge, and it's closing in fast. Varric's heart skipped a beat. What is it? He demanded, his voice hard. It's a ship, Zella said, her voice strained. But it's not like anything we've ever seen. Its design, it's beyond anything the humans should be capable of. Varric's eyes narrowed. The puzzle pieces were beginning to come together, but there was still so much he didn't understand. Who were these humans? What kind of force had they mobilized in response to the Zoroth fleet? And most importantly, were they really the weak, primitive creatures the Zoroth had always believed them to be? As the alien fleet continued its approach, the mystery deepened. Varric's mind raced. There was no turning back now. The first signs of human resistance had appeared, and they were far more formidable than anyone could have predicted. He watched as the massive, unknown ship slowly came into view on the fleet's sensors. The energy readings around it spiked dramatically. Whatever this ship was, it wasn't like anything the Zoroth had ever encountered before. The silence in the command center was palpable as the unknown human warship continued to appear on the sensors, its presence growing more undeniable by the second. General Farouk's eyes locked onto the holographic display, where the strange, massive shape of the ship began to take form. It was like no vessel he had ever seen, a perfect blend of sleek, organic curves and cold, mechanical edges, as though designed to invoke fear in any who dared face it. For a brief moment, Varric felt his chest tighten, an unfamiliar sensation gnawing at him. This was not like any primitive craft the Zoroth had ever encountered. It's huge, Zella whispered, her voice barely audible, but the awe and disbelief were clear. General Varric didn't respond. Instead, he ordered the fleet to halt, the command resounding through the bridge like a thunderclap. His heart pounded in his chest. This was no ordinary human ship. Its structure was emitting powerful energy waves that defied all known physics, sending erratic signals across their sensors. There was something raw, primal, and dangerous about it. He leaned forward, narrowing his gaze at the ship's trajectory. It wasn't moving like any normal craft. There was no sign of it adjusting to gravity fields or utilizing conventional thrusters. It seemed to glide effortlessly, as if it was floating through space with a purpose, far beyond what the Zoroth had ever been capable of themselves. The ship's size was unfathomably twice as large as any of their warships, dwarfing even the Vakar, and yet, despite its immensity, the ship moved with an unsettling fluidity, like an apex predator stalking its prey. Varric could sense the power it radiated, the unseen force of something built for war on an unimaginable scale. He could feel his officers stirring behind him, the uncertainty in their eyes, a sharp contrast to the usual stoic expressions they wore. These were warriors, bred for battle, yet they were unsure. The sight of this ship, this human creation, made them question everything they knew about the galaxy's order. The Zoroth had long considered themselves the apex species, the rulers of space, and yet this was something different. The ship wasn't just a machine, it was alive with a kind of energy they couldn't comprehend. The silence continued to linger. In the quiet, Varric could hear the faint hum of his ship's systems, the creak of metal beneath him. It was almost as if the Vakar itself sensed the threat approaching. General Zella's voice broke through the quiet again. Urgent now. We've confirmed its energy source. It's immense. The readings are unlike anything in our database. It's generating power on a scale we've never witnessed before, not even from our own weapons. Varric's jaw clenched. How can this be possible? He muttered, his voice low but filled with disbelief. The Zoroth had scoured the galaxy, wiping out entire civilizations with superior technology. The idea that the humans had managed to build such a vessel without their knowledge, without even the faintest hint of it, was unthinkable. His mind raced as he considered the options. The fleet was ready to engage. All he had to do was give the order and the first strike would be launched, decimating the human ship and proving their superiority once again. But something held him back. The energy radiating from the human warship was too much. It made the very air in the bridge seem dense, oppressive. The feeling wasn't just fear, it was something deeper. The humans were not what they had been led to believe. They were not weak, not primitive, but something else altogether. Scan it again, Varric barked, the words coming out sharper than he intended. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. No mistakes. Zella nodded and tapped her console rapidly. The flickering display before them shimmered as the ship's systems processed the request, but the results were still unclear. The ship was cloaked in a strange field, an energy barrier so dense it was nearly impossible to penetrate. Each scan came back fragmented, like trying to peer through a fog of war. Every attempt to get a better look at the ship was met with failure. It was as if the very fabric of reality around it was bent, distorted. The unknown ship's engines, still shrouded in mystery, flared once more. This time the fleet's sensors picked up a strange, high-pitched hummer sound that seemed to reverberate throughout the cosmos. It was unnerving, something primal that struck deep at the heart of every Zorath soldier. The fear that had been slowly building among the fleet members was now palpable. Even the bravest officers dared not speak. "General, we have visual contact," Zella reported, her voice tense, her hands steady despite the growing tension. On the display, a new image appeared. It was still blurry, almost like an illusion, but the shape of the warship became clearer. It was far larger than expected. Massive, towering in comparison to the Zorath ships. The human vessel glowed faintly in the dark, the edges of its design radiating an eerie, almost unnatural energy. Then, without warning, the ship shifted its position. The action was instantaneous, too fast for the Zorath to track with their sensors. In the blink of an eye, the ship moved from the far side of the Earth, directly into the path of the Zorath fleet. Every officer aboard the Varka, from Varric down to the lowest-ranking technician, held their breath. This wasn't just a maneuver, it was a challenge. The humans were daring them to attack. Varric's eyes narrowed. His instincts screamed at him to respond, to fire their weapons and obliterate the threat. But something inside him, something primal, told him to hesitate. He had fought in countless battles, and never had he felt this unease, this uncertainty. The humans, whom the Zorath had written off as nothing more than primitive creatures, had just proven that they were far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. "Prepare to fire," Varric commanded, his voice resolute. But the weight of his words carried a heavy, unspoken understanding. This would be no ordinary battle. But even as the command was given, Varric couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap, one set by a species that had far more at its disposal than the Zorath could ever fathom. The moments that followed felt like an eternity. The Zorath fleet hung motionless in space, each ship frozen in a kind of tense anticipation. The human warship's movements had stunned them all too swift, too calculated, as if it knew exactly what the Zorath were going to do before they did it. General Farok's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the holographic display. Watching the massive human vessel loom larger and larger in the viewports, the energy readings continued to pulse, growing stronger with every passing second, but the Zorath fleet could not yet make sense of it. Varric's fingers trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of his command chair. He had led his people to countless victories, each one marked by overwhelming force. But this time felt different. The humans had caught him off guard, something no one had ever done before. He had dismissed them as primitive, weak, easy prey for the superior Zorath might. Now, here they were, standing their ground with a power he couldn't comprehend, and it unnerved him. His mind raced as he weighed the possibilities, each one worse than the last. Could they actually be defeated? Zella stood beside him, her hands hovering over the controls, her face pale with a mixture of awe and concern. "General, we've done all we can with the scans. There's no way to penetrate the ship's energy shield. It's unlike anything we've encountered before. Our weapons may be useless against it." Varric didn't respond immediately. The hum of the Varkar's engines seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the sound of his thoughts swirling in his mind. The Zorath had never failed before. Their fleets had torn through entire star systems with ruthless efficiency. But now, there was something about the human ship that made him second-guess everything. How had they managed to create such a formidable force in secret? It didn't add up. "I've never seen anything like this," Zella added quietly. "The humans, they must have been hiding something. There's no way this could be their first ship like this." Varric's eyes narrowed as he stared at the massive vessel that stood before them. The human ship was not just a ship, it was a statement, a challenge. And as the Zorath fleet waited, the growing realization began to settle in. This wasn't a fight they had prepared for. They were facing a race that had kept its true power hidden, biding its time until now. "I'm not retreating," Varric finally said, his voice cold and determined. His decision was firm. If the Zoroth turned tail now, it would not just be a failure, it would be the beginning of the end. The galaxy would see it, and the Zoroth Empire would crumble under the weight of their shame. No, the humans would not win this day. He stood, pushing the thoughts of uncertainty from his mind. Open a channel to the fleet, he ordered. Zella quickly complied, and the fleet was now connected. Varric's voice echoed through the various ships, rallying his soldiers to one final push. The humans are not our equals, and today we will show them why. Prepare for battle. But as the fleet's readiness indicators began to light up, something unexpected happened. A sudden, sharp noise pierced the command center, a sound that didn't belong. It was a deep, resonant thrum of vibration that seemed to shake the very air around them. The lights flickered as though the entire ship was being affected by it, and then, to Varric's horror, it became clear. It wasn't just the Varka that was shaking. The entire fleet was rattling. What in the stars is that? Zella shouted, her voice tinged with fear as the sound intensified. The once steady hum of the fleet's engines was now being drowned out by the low-frequency pulse emanating from the human ship. The vibrations increased in power, causing the Zoroth warships to wobble in their formation. A chill ran down Varric's spine as the realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. The human warship wasn't just sending a message, it was asserting dominance. The ship was broadcasting something, a signal that radiated out in all directions, pushing against the Zoroth fleet with a force they couldn't resist. No, this cannot be, Varric shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. We are the conquerors, we rule the stars. But the human ship, massive and unyielding, seemed to mock his words. It had tapped into a frequency, a form of communication, the Zoroth could not comprehend. The ship wasn't just alive, it was alive in ways they hadn't even begun to understand. Without warning, the human warship released a pulse of energy, bright and blinding, that lit up the space around them. For a moment, everything went white. The Zoroth fleet was frozen in place, its systems overloaded by the sheer intensity of the blast. When the light faded, the human ship was still there, unscathed, while the Zoroth ships, every single one, were left scrambling to stay afloat. What is this? Zella whispered, her voice barely a whisper. It's like they're bending reality itself. Varric's hands clenched into fists. He could feel the fear spreading through his crew, infecting his officers. The once proud fleet was beginning to falter. The Zoroth had never been afraid, but in that moment, the sheer scale of the power the humans wielded made them question everything they had known. Re-establish control, Varric snapped, his voice harsh as he snapped back into command mode. Focus, we will not be bested by these ... primitives. But even as he spoke, something inside him knew. The war had shifted. No longer were the humans an easy target. They had evolved, adapted, and whatever their capabilities were, the Zoroth were now faced with an enemy that refused to be underestimated. The pulse of energy continued to spread, sweeping through the fleet like an unseen tide, disrupting the Zoroth's systems. Each ship shuddered under the pressure, and for a moment the fleet's formation collapsed, as if the very fabric of their existence was being torn apart. Varric stood, staring at the human ship through the viewport, his mind racing. Prepare to fire, he ordered again, though his heart was no longer fully in it. He wasn't sure if their weapons would even work. The overwhelming sense of power emanating from the human warship had sown seeds of doubt in his mind. Just then, the human ship did something the Zoroth hadn't anticipated. It fired. Not a traditional weapon blast, but something far more bizarre. A wave of rippling energy shot out, not toward the fleet, but directly into the heart of their communications network. The Zoroth could only watch in stunned silence as their systems began to break down, one by one, with each pulse. From the human ship, "This is no ordinary enemy," Varric muttered, the realization sinking in deeper than ever before. The humans had not only designed a ship capable of matching the might of the Zoroth, they had created a force that could break their empire from within. The tide was turning, and Varric knew it would be a battle unlike any he had ever fought before. This war wasn't about to end in their favor. The tension in the air thickened as the human warship's pulse continued to reverberate through the Zoroth fleet, the rippling waves of energy now deep within the heart of their ships. General Varric stood frozen, staring at the chaos unfolding. On his fleet's holographic displays, the once orderly formation of the Zoroth warships was now in disarray. Their systems, crippled by the human ship's unrelenting energy pulses, flickered sporadically, making it difficult for the fleet to maintain any semblance of coordination. It was as if the very fabric of their technology was unraveling under the intensity of the human ship's assault. "Report," Varric demanded, his voice harsh and edged with growing desperation. His fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles ached, but the feeling of control was slipping away from him. He had always been the one in charge, the one who commanded the battles, but now it was as if he were being swept away by an unstoppable tide. Zella, her face pale, her hands shaking, turned to face him. The systems are failing, General. Our shields are down. Our weapon systems are offline. We can't track the human ship. It's not ... It's like it's cloaked in a different frequency. Then get them back online, Varric snapped, his voice rising with frustration, but deep down, he knew it was no use. The humans had done something he had never anticipated. They had used their technology in ways the Zoroth couldn't even comprehend, let alone counter. Another pulse of energy shot through the fleet, and this time, it wasn't just the electronics that faltered. The entire ship seemed to tremble, as if the very fabric of reality around them was bending, warping, and the laws of physics no longer applied. The command center of the Varkar flickered as the lights dimmed momentarily. For a brief second, it felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. General Zella whispered, her voice strained with fear. The fleet, ... They're retreating. Varric's eyes shot to the holographic map, and to his horror, he saw it. His fleet, his pride, the invincible Zoroth armada, was retreating. One by one, ships were beginning to break away from the formation. Their trajectory is erratic, as if the energy pulses from the human ship were throwing them off course. The once unified fleet was now a collection of panicked, disorganized ships. Ordered them to hold position. Varric barked, his heart hammering in his chest, but the command felt hollow even as it left his lips. How could he give an order, when it was already too late? The Zorath were not a people who retreated. They were conquerors, feared across the galaxy for their unrelenting might. But the fear spreading through the fleet was undeniable, and with it Varric's own resolve was starting to crack. General Zella said, her voice breaking, "It's not just the fleet, it's the entire galaxy, the human warship. It's broadcasting on every frequency. The energy pulses are not just affecting our systems. The entire communication network across several star systems is starting to distort. This is more than just a ship. They've weaponized the very fabric of space itself." Varric's mind reeled at her words. The idea of one ship, one human ship, having the ability to alter space-time on such a scale was inconceivable. They had barely begun to comprehend their own technology. Yet the humans had managed to reach a level of mastery that made the Zorath seem like children playing with toys. The weight of it all pressed down on him like an anvil. "General," a voice from one of the lower officers broke through the chaos, snapping Varric back to the present. "There's another ship, another human ship. It's emerging from the other side of the planet." Varric's heart skipped a beat. The first warship had already proven to be a nightmare, and now there was another one. His mind raced with the possibilities. If the humans had more ships like this, if they had developed an entire fleet, it would be the end of the Zoroth. The empire he had fought so hard to build would crumble, shattered by a species they had once underestimated. The holographic display flickered again, and now, to Varric's shock, the second human ship appeared on the screen. It was smaller than the first, but its design was just as sleek, just as deadly. It moved with a quiet confidence, as if it knew it was untouchable. And yet, it too radiated a kind of power that Varric couldn't fathom. As the new human ship joined its predecessor, the pulse of energy intensified. It was as if the very space around them was bending and folding, warping under the pressure of the human technology. The Zoroth ships struggled to maintain stability. The Varkar, once a symbol of power, now felt like a ragdoll in the hands of an invisible force. The fleet's once mighty weapons were useless, their defensive systems in disarray. "We need to get out of here," Zella said urgently. "We can't fight this. It's too much." Varric didn't respond immediately. His mind was consumed by the failure of it all. The Zoroth had always been the predators, the conquerors. They had swept across the stars, destroying everything in their path. Now, they were the ones hunted. His pride, his entire race, was on the verge of being wiped out by a species they had once thought insignificant. He turned back to the display. The human warships, now both hovering ominously above the planet, sent out another pulse. This one was different. It didn't just disrupt the Zoroth's systems, it sent a shockwave through space itself. The Varkar trembled again, this time with a force that was impossible to ignore. The human ships were no longer just showing dominance, they were asserting control over the very space the Zoroth inhabited. A deep, unsettling silence fell over the bridge. The Zoroth fleet, battered and broken, had no response. The human ships had destroyed everything that the Zoroth had built in a matter of minutes. General Varric knew then that this was no longer A fight. It was a revelation. The humans were not just a new threat, they were a new force in the galaxy, and they had proven, in a single moment, that they could destroy the Zoroth Empire with a mere wave of their hand. The final blow came swiftly, as the human ships launched another wave of energy, sending shockwaves throughout the fleet. Systems began to shut down one by one, and for the first time in his life, General Varrock felt completely and utterly powerless. The war was over, and in that moment he realized humanity had not just survived, they had won. The hum of the Zoroth fleet had faded into an eerie silence. General Varrock stood at the helm of the Varka, his fingers clenched into fists, eyes fixed on the human warships that hovered with unyielding might. It was the calm after the storm, but the storm had not passed. It had only just begun. The human ships, now clearly more than just a warning, were still alive with an energy that felt almost sentient, as though they were breathing, watching, waiting. Varrock felt his mind unravel as he looked at the shattered fleet before him. The once proud ships that had been designed to strike fear into the hearts of any enemy were now nothing more than crippled, broken husks. Their weapons were silent, their engines sputtering in distress. The Grand Armada that had been sent to annihilate Earth was now on the verge of collapse, and it wasn't at the hands of a superior force. It was the overwhelming, unrelenting power of human ingenuity that had brought them to their knees. General, we've lost contact with several of the ships. Zella's voice broke through the quiet, but it did little to snap Varrock out of his daze. Her voice was no longer filled with command, but laced with the desperation of someone who had seen the inevitable unfold in real time. Keep trying, Varrock muttered, though he knew it was futile. There was nothing left to try. His fleet was lost, scattered, and those who had tried to flee were being hunted by the very energy pulses that had torn their systems apart. But even in the face of such devastation, a stubborn flicker of defiance remained within him. The Z could not just surrender. They could not be erased from the history of the galaxy. They were conquerors. They were the rulers of space, and they could not let a species of primitive humans take that away from them. Not like this. His gaze shifted to the human ships once again, and he saw it, a slight shimmer in the air around them like a ripple through the fabric of space itself. The humans were preparing for something, a final blow, a declaration of victory. Varrock's breath caught in his throat as he realized that the humans were not finished. They were just beginning. Ordered the remaining ships to regroup, Varrock barked, his voice sharp with renewed urgency. If we have any hope of surviving this, we need to fight back. They are not invincible. Zella hesitated, but only for a moment. General, we don't have the firepower to challenge them. Our systems are still failing. The second human ship, it's showing no signs of damage. It's almost as if their technology adapts with every strike. Varrock's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. Their technology ... adapting. The very idea seemed preposterous, but everything about this encounter had been beyond anything he could have imagined. These humans, with their hidden ships and unrelenting power, had done what entire star systems had failed to do. They had halted the Zoroth. They had given the universe a glimpse of what it meant to truly face a new kind of power. Then we adapt to, Varrock muttered, more to himself than anyone else. We have technology that can counter them. We have weapons designed for situations like this. We will not be defeated by them. But as the words left his lips, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. The Zoroth had always been the predators, but now, for the first time, they were the prey, and the humans weren't just playing defense. They were shaping the battlefield, altering the rules in real time, and making the Zoroth appear weak in comparison. The seconds stretched into minutes as the fleet struggled to reorganize, but every moment felt like an eternity. The battle, which had once seemed so certain, now teetered on the edge of a razor. As the fleet's few remaining ships limped back into formation, Varrock saw it. The human warships began to move. Their energy pulses, once sporadic, were now synchronized. They had found a rhythm, a pulse of their own, and the Zoroth were no longer in control of the situation. The human ships didn't fire immediately. Instead, they closed the distance slowly, deliberately, as though they were letting the Zoroth feel the weight of their actions. It was a psychological tactic, and it was working. The Zoroth officers began to exchange uneasy glances. Their fingers hovered over their consoles, ready to fight, but no one made a move. The fear was too real. Then, the first of the human ships sent out a shockwave, not a blast, but a pulse that rippled through space. The Zoroth ships groaned under the weight of the wave, their hulls shaking as if the energy itself were seeking to tear them apart. From the inside, Varric's stomach lurched as he watched the sensors. The ships that had once been capable of wiping entire fleets from existence were now struggling to stay afloat, to even maintain their position. Their own weapons were useless, their shields non-existent. The ripple from the human warship had destabilized everything. The second human ship followed suit, sending its own pulse, but this time, it was stronger, more forceful. The fleet's remaining ships groaned as they were pushed further out of formation. The Zoroth were being pushed to the edge of their own space, shoved by an invisible force they could not fight. And then, without warning, the human warship launched its first true attack. A beam of energy shot out from the front of the vessel, carving through the dark void of space. The beam was not just a weapon, it was a symbol. It was a sign that the humans had arrived, and they were here to stay. The Zoroth fleet, now nothing more than a scattered group of crippled ships, had no answer to the might of the human warships. The once feared empire that had dominated the galaxy for centuries was being dismantled piece by piece. And in the midst of it all, General Varrock could only stand, watching the fall of his people with a sense of helplessness he had never known. He clenched his jaw, a mix of rage and disbelief flooding through him. "We cannot let this be the end," he whispered to himself. But deep down he knew that the Zoroth had been defeated not by their weapons, not by their fleet, but by something far more insidious, the ingenuity of a species they had once thought unworthy of attention. Varric's gaze remained fixed on the human ships as they loomed larger, their power undeniable. The war had shifted irrevocably, and no matter what the Zoroth did now, they would never regain the dominance they had lost that day. The fleet, what was left of it, drifted aimlessly in the black void. The remnants of the once mighty Zoroth armada were now mere floating debris, their once advanced ships now reduced to broken husks. The Varkar, the flagship, once the pride of their empire, was barely operational. The once proud symbol of their dominance had been humbled, its systems shattered, its crew exhausted and battered. General Varrock stood at the center of the bridge, his body tense, his mind still reeling from the reality that had unfolded before him. The humans had not only proven to be more powerful than he had ever imagined, they had destroyed everything the Zoroth had worked for. The pride of their civilization had been crushed beneath the weight of human ingenuity, and with it, their reputation. The Zoroth were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. They had been defeated, decisively and brutally. Varrock clenched, his fists at his sides, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen, but the sight before him did little to comfort him. The human warships, though still hovering in the distance, were silent now. Their energy pulses momentarily subsided. The oppressive quiet that filled the void seemed to echo with a single, unspoken truth. The Zoroth were done. General Zeller's voice broke through his thoughts, shaky but determined. "We've lost most of the fleet. Our weapons are non-functional and our communications are completely offline. We're crippled." Varrock didn't respond. He couldn't. Words felt meaningless now, hollow. He had spent his entire life preparing for battles like this, believing that the Zoroth would always reign supreme. But now, standing amidst the ruins of their once great empire, he realized just how fragile that belief had been. The humans had turned everything he knew about power on its head. They had used something he couldn't even understand, an invisible force, a kind of energy that bent the laws of physics themselves to defeat an entire fleet. General Zeller continued, her voice softer now. "What do we do? Do we surrender?" The word stung Varrock like a physical blow. Surrender. To the humans, the very idea seemed absurd. The Zoroth had never surrendered. Their empire had been built on conquest, on the fear and awe they inspired in every species they encountered. They had wiped out entire civilizations without a second thought, and now they were the ones on their knees. The humiliation gnawed at Varrock's insides, but beneath it, there was something else. Something deep in his chest that refused to give in, that refused to let this be the end. He was a Zoroth, born to lead, born to conquer, to bend the galaxy to his will. And while he knew they had been defeated for now, a fire still burned within him. "No," Varrock said, his voice a low growl. "We do not surrender." Zeller looked at him, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "But, General, we know," he repeated, his gaze hardening. "We don't surrender. We regroup. We'll find a way. We are not finished yet. The humans may have won today, but they don't understand what we are. We are the Zoroth. We adapt. We survive." His words hung in the air for a moment. For the first time since the battle had begun, the crew began to rally. They had been beaten, yes, but they had not been broken. The Zoroth might be wounded, but they were not yet dead. Varrock's gaze shifted toward the crippled remains of their fleet. It would take time to rebuild, to recover from the losses they had suffered, but it was not impossible. The human ships were still hovering in the distance, watching them, waiting. They hadn't finished the job, not yet. Varric knew this wasn't just about the humans and their warships, it was about more than just one battle. It was about the galaxy, and the place the Zorith would continue to hold within it. They think they've won, Varric muttered, more to himself than anyone else. But they don't understand us. We'll return, and when we do, they won't be prepared. We'll learn from this. We'll make them understand what it means to face the Zorith. Zella looked at him with a mixture of confusion and hope. You still think we can recover from this? Varric's eyes burned with a quiet fury. Yes, we will. But first we must understand the humans. We must know what drives them, how they were able to wield such power. And when we find that answer, when we figure out their weaknesses, his voice trailed off, and for the first time since the battle began, he allowed himself to believe. Perhaps this was just the beginning of something larger, something far more complex. The humans had taken the first step, but the Zorith had a long history of overcoming the impossible. They would learn from this, adapt, and rise again. We'll make them regret underestimating us, Varric said, his tone cold, determined. This is not over. The bridge was silent for a moment, and then slowly, one by one, the officers began to nod. There was fear in their eyes, yes, but also something else, something they had lost in the chaos of the battle, a sense of purpose. The Zorith were not done. Not by a long shot. The broken fleet began to stir as the officers on board issued quiet commands to get their ships moving. They would retreat, yes, but not in defeat. They would lick their wounds, regroup, and when the time was right, they would strike again. Varric stood tall, his mind already shifting into the next phase of their survival. The humans had dealt them a blow, yes, but they had also awakened something within him, something ancient. The Zorith were conquerors, and no matter how far they fell, they would rise again. And this time, the humans would know what it meant to face the true might of the Zorith.